Welcome to John's Random Reviews. Hi, welcome back to John's Random Reviews. Now this is the proper random one today. This is about a cartoon strip from America called Calvin and Hobbes, which was from 1985 till 1995. Now the first time I knew about Calvin and Hobbes, my mum and dad used to buy the Daily Express, and in the back of the Daily Express they used to have little cartoon strips, and it was the first time I saw Calvin and Hobbes cartoon strip. So a bit of a background, the guy who drew Calvin and Hobbes and did all the writing was a guy called Bill Watterson, and he started doing Calvin and Hobbes, the cartoon, in 1985. And if you just come in a bit, I will show you some of the books. Now it did originally it was in newspapers, and it was franchised to thousands and thousands of newspapers all over the world. And I'm not going to say this is definitely true, but pretty much this was the biggest cartoon strip that was in newspapers in the world at that time, in the late 80s. Now, a lot of people in the UK really won't be familiar with Calvin and Hobbes, but if you give yourself a little bit of time and just sort of get one of the books or find out about it, it is amazing. I could sit here for hours and hours and talk about this, but we're going to go through a bit of the details, what it is all about. Right, what is the Calvin and Hobbes cartoon about? Well, it's a story of a little lad called Calvin who's approximately 6 years old, and he lives with his mum and dad. His mum and dad live in a middle class sort of house in America, and he's got a little toy stuffed tiger. But this is where it gets a little bit weird and a little bit, not complicated, but when Calvin is on his own with Hobbes, his toy tiger, Hobbes is alive. What I mean by that, he is a fully formed animal, but he can talk, Hobbes can talk, and he is Calvin's best friend. But when an adult comes into the room, or anybody else, Hobbes is seen in the frame as just being a stuffed tiger. So only Calvin sort of talks to him. So some people would say, well, that's all Calvin's imagination, and some people think that Hobbes is actually real, but no one else can see him. But they go into they have all sorts of adventures around the neighbourhood. Now then, the Calvin and Hobbes books, which into dozens of books, they sold about 450 million copies. They're still selling today, even though a lot of people in the UK don't really know about it, but worldwide. Now, as I've said before, Bill Watterson started doing Calvin and Hobbes in 1985, and he finished it in 1995. Now, I don't know all the details, but I think he thought it had run its course. So he actually left the scene as such, and he sort of disappeared. He has given a few interviews, but he's never done another cartoon strip after that, and he's never does interviews or anything like that. So pretty much it was from a little period of 10-year period of doing it. Now, Bill Watterson, as I can imagine, he thought this was like an art form, a very pure art form. Obviously, he did all the drawings, and he watercoloured all the colour in them, and he was very particular about how he did it. And at one time he was asked to do merchandise. Now, whether that meant little dolls or little toy figures of Calvin and Hobbes, people think that he could have made in excess of $30 million for merchandising Calvin and Hobbes. T-shirts, mugs, and like a lot of the big cartoons at the time, they were all merchandise and turned into all sorts of stuff like that, and also turned into cartoons and stuff like that and whatever. But Bill Watterson refused. It was an art form that he loved, and he didn't want it to be diluted. He wanted to stay pure. So he never did it, and he lost a lot of money But I think that's one of the cool things about it. Right, just to show how big the Calvin and Hobbes cartoon strip was in the late 80s, early 90s, I've got some actually fantastic. This is called the Funny Pages. If you come in a little bit, a friend of mine from America, I was in America in the early 90s and he gave me these. This is from the Los Angeles Times. This is actually San Diego County edition. Sunday morning, March the 15th, 1992. So this is the Funny Pages, which used to go in the Los Angeles Times. And the head story, the top cartoon strip of the time was, yes, Calvin and Hobbes. Now you might recognise Peanuts, which was a massive cartoon, American cartoon. That was second. Calvin and Hobbes was the lead cartoon in the LA Times. So you can see it, absolutely amazing. They broke away, what Bill Watson did, he broke away from the normal formatted pictures of the cartoon strips and he made it his own. So these Calvin and Hobbes cartoon, this is a Peanuts one with like all the picture frames look all the same, but what he did was he mixed it up and he had a big one there and then like a long rectangular one and he mixed it up so it was more like an art form. Obviously he painted all these himself and it was amazing. So this just shows how big the Calvin and Hobbes was in the early 90s. So these are fantastic. I absolutely love these. I've got about a dozen of these just to remind me how big Calvin and Hobbes was. Calvin and Hobbes was, and it really got a cartoon format that was in newspapers. It was put in books later on, but this was his main format going in newspapers. These are some of the books that he brought, Bill Watson brought out. I actually haven't got the first one. I don't know where the first book is, but these are his the main books, and these are his collections of the bits of all the other books. So let's talk about one of Calvin's, apart from Calvin and Hobbes, one of the main characters. Now this little girl is called Susie Durkins and she is in quite a few of the actual stories, in Calvin Hobbes stories. She lives just around the corner from Calvin and Calvin's always teasing her and picking on her, but I think if you read all the books, I think he secretly likes her. I think he's secretly got a crush on Susie Durkins. I know Hobbes does. Hobbes the tiger, he really fancies Susie Durkins. Now if you're wondering why I've got a painting of Susie Durkins, a lot of years ago my brother, who was a fine art painter, he did a painting of Susie Durkins, and if you look up above, there's a fantastic painting of Calvin and Hobbes going for a lovely winter's walk. So what do I love about Calvin and Hobbes? Well, it's funny and it's very touching, the relationships between Calvin and Hobbes and Calvin and his mum and dad. Calvin can be a very naughty boy, but it doesn't mean he's not got a malicious streak, and it's the relationships between Calvin and his toy tiger. Well, he's not a toy, it's his best friend. Hobbes is his best friend and he's alive. He's a proper living friend according to Calvin, and I love Calvin's relationship with his mum and dad. And there's other characters like Susie Durkins there, and there's a relationship he has with his school teacher called Mrs. Crabtree, and there's a few other characters that come in, but it's in one aspect funny, and then in other respects it's very touching, and it's quite sad, some of it, and some of it actually topical now. Is about the environment and all sorts of social issues. So if you ever get a chance to come across Calvin and Hobbes cartoons, it is amazing. I know it's a cartoon, but it's not just for kids, it's for every age group, and you'll be able to find little bits that you like or love in all of the Calvin and Hobbes book. And it's part of my growing up. When I was a teenager, I absolutely loved it. I still love it. So Calvin and Hobbes, an absolutely amazing American cartoon strip, which is sort of unknown in this country. It's under the radar, but if you find out about it, it is absolutely amazing. So there you go, Calvin and Hobbes. I love it. Okay, thank you for watching. Random is rad. Rock on. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, unsubscribe, give me a thumbs up, give me a thumbs down, tell me you love me, tell me you hate me, tell your friends and neighbours, tell that weird guy from across the street with the one-eyed dog, tell me anything, but most importantly, let